October 14, 2023, 09:42 a.m. The sweltering heat of the Solomon Islands pushes through the dense canopy, raising the temperature to a suffocating 98 degrees. A metal detector sweeps over a patch of roots and rotting vegetation, emitting a frantic, high-pitched shriek. The excavation team, led by battlefield archaeologist Dr. Silas Vance, stops. This is the deep jungle of Guadalcanal, a place where history has been swallowed by the earth for 80 years. Vance drops to his knees, his gloved hands tearing at the muddy soil. He isn't looking for gold. He is looking for the source of an anomaly that satellite imaging picked up weeks earlier, a concentration of ferrous metal that makes no sense in this sector of the jungle. He pulls back a tangle of vine, revealing a rusted, cylindrical barrel protruding from the mud. It is not the standard-issue barrel of an M1 Garand, nor the perforated cooling jacket of a machine gun. It is something older, something that shouldn't be here. As the team clears the muck, the distinctive perforated heat shield of a Winchester Model 1897 trench gun emerges into the dappled sunlight. But it is what lies beneath the weapon that sends a chill through the team. Under the weapon, encased in the anaerobic mud that preserves metal against the march of time, is a distinct pile of spent brass casings. Not the standard .3006 rifle cartridges used by the U.S. Army and Marines. These are massive, 12-gauge shotgun shells, stamped with a manufacture date of 1918. Vance freezes. The official reports from this specific sector state that the Marine unit stationed here was overrun in minutes, their lines broken by a massive Japanese infiltration attack. The records claim they were ill-equipped, low on ammunition, and unable to halt the human wave. But the debris tells a different story. Surrounding the shotgun are not the signs of a rout, but the geometric precision of a kill zone. The casings are piled in a semicircle. The barrel of the shotgun is fused open, the heat of its final firing so intense it warped the steel. This was not a weapon that was dropped in panic. This was a weapon that was fired until it literally melted. And most disturbing of all, the excavation pit reveals a second layer of artifacts. Japanese officer swords and helmets, stacked in a way that suggests they were stopped dead in their tracks, mere feet from the Marines' position. Why would a Marine in World War II be using a weapon designed for the trenches of France? Why do the official after-action reports omit the presence of these weapons in this sector? And why, when Vance examines the receiver of the rusted gun, does he find the serial number filed off? If you want to see how this story unfolds, hit the like button. The jungle of Guadalcanal holds many secrets, but this rusted shotgun points to a forgotten chapter of the Pacific War. It hints at a desperate adaptation, a terrifying night of combat, and a weapon so effective the enemy claimed it was. A war crime. Who was the Marine holding this gun? And how did a weapon from the previous generation manage to stop the most feared infantry tactic of the 20th century? To understand why a filed-off shotgun was buried in the mud of the South Pacific, we must look at the man likely holding it. Let's call him Sergeant Miller, a composite of the old breed Marines who formed the backbone of the 1st Marine Division in 1942. Miller is 32 years old, a lifetime in the infantry. He isn't a fresh-faced draftee from an Iowa farm. He is a veteran of the banana wars in Nicaragua and Haiti. He is gray at his temples and a cynicism etched into his face that only comes from close-quarters combat. While the propaganda posters back home depicted Marines as eager heroes, men like Miller were pragmatic survivors. They knew that in the jungle, honor meant nothing. Survival was the only currency. The year is 1942. The world is on fire. The Japanese Imperial Navy dominates the Pacific. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese military machine has swept across Asia and the Pacific Islands with terrifying speed. They are considered invincible. Their soldiers are hardened, disciplined, and masters of night infiltration. The U.S. Marines, meanwhile, are thrust into the first major offensive of the war, Operation Watchtower, the invasion of Guadalcanal. The situation on the ground is catastrophic. The U.S. Navy, battered and fearful of Japanese carriers, has withdrawn the transport fleet, leaving the Marines stranded on the island with limited supplies. They are surviving on captured Japanese rice and magatridon oats. But the real crisis is tactical. The Marines are equipped with the M1 Garand and the M1903 Springfield. These are excellent rifles, accurate, powerful, and effective at 500 yards. However, the jungle doesn't offer 500-yard sightlines. In the dense, rotting vegetation of the Solomons, visibility is often less than 20 feet. The Japanese tactics are designed to exploit this. They don't fight at a distance. They crawl through the undergrowth at night, launching bands, charges, suicide assaults meant to overwhelm enemy positions with sheer psychological terror and bayonets. A bolt-action Springfield is useless when 3 enemy soldiers are sprinting at you from 10 yards away. Even the semi-automatic Garand, with its long barrel and heavy weight, is cumbersome to swing in the tight confines of a foxhole. Miller and the other veterans sense the problem immediately. They recognize the sound of the jungle at night, the snapping twigs, the rustle of grass, and they know their high-powered rifles are the wrong tools for the job. They need something else, something faster. This is where the anomaly begins. Official supply manifests for the initial Guadalcanal landing show a severe shortage of specialized close-quarters weaponry. Thompson submachine guns are rare, reserved for officers and scouts. The heavy bars, Browning. Automatic rifles are too unwieldy for snap shooting in the dark. But there are rumors in the supply depots, whispers of crates that were never officially logged. Back in 1918, during the Great War, the U.S. military had deployed the Winchester Model 1897 shotgun. It was a pump-action beast that the Germans terrifiedly nicknamed the trench broom. It was so effective that the German government issued a diplomatic protest, threatening to execute any American captured with one or a shotgun shell in his possession. They claimed it caused unnecessary suffering. The U.S. ignored the protest. After WWI, thousands of these shotguns were oiled, crated, and put into storage, considered obsolete for modern mechanized warfare. The prevailing military doctrine of the 1930s and 40s emphasized range and precision fire. The shotgun was seen as a relic, a police weapon, or something for guarding prisoners. It wasn't supposed to be on the front lines of a modern war. What the history books often gloss over is the midnight requisition. Veterans like Miller, knowing what was coming, didn't wait for orders from the Pentagon. They knew that in the jungle, a weapon that could spray 9.33 caliber pellets in a spreading cone was worth more than a dozen precision rifles. Foreshadowing the mystery found in 2023, logistical reports from late 1942 show peculiar discrepancies. Caches of 12-gauge ammunition, specifically brass-cased, 0 buckshot, began to disappear from rear-echelon supply dumps in New Caledonia. Officers turned a blind eye. They saw the fear in the eyes of the men coming back from the line. They heard the stories of Japanese soldiers appearing out of the darkness like ghosts. But there was a darker secret involved. The standard-issue paper-hulled shotgun shells of the era were disastrous in the humid tropics. They swelled with moisture, jamming the guns instantly. The brass shells, the ones found by Vance's team, were rare, expensive, and officially reserved. For other purposes, their presence in a foxhole on Guadalcanal suggests a supply chain that was operating off the books, driven by desperation. What they didn't know was that the Japanese High Command had already issued orders regarding these weapons. Captured documents reveal that Japanese officers were instructed to target Marines carrying flame-spouting tubes first. The psychological impact of the weapon was already taking hold, setting the stage for a collision between the Bushido code of the Banzai charge and the mechanical brutality of American industrial power. The journey to the front line was a descent into hell. For Sergeant Miller and his squad, the mission was not officially recorded as a shotgun deployment. It was a standard patrol to reinforce a listening post on the perimeter of Henderson Field, the vital airstrip the Marines were protecting. The date is October 24, 1942. The weather is a torrential downpour that turns the world into a gray, watery blur. Miller carries the trench gun wrapped in oilcloth to keep it dry. It feels different than his rifle, shorter, rattlier, brutal in its simplicity. He has acquired 50 rounds of all-brass buckshot, traded for 3 bottles of whiskey and a captured Japanese pistol. This transaction is the difference between life and death. The squad moves out at 18:00 hours, stepping into the tree line. The jungle closes behind them like a heavy curtain. The air smells of ozone, rotting vegetation, and the metallic tang of fear. Every step is a struggle against the mud, which clings to their boots in 5-pound clumps. They trek 3 miles to the forward ridge, a jagged spine of coral and earth overlooking the dense river valley below. Distance 3 miles, time elapsed 4 hours, elevation gain 400 feet. As they dig in, the reality of their isolation sets in. They are 500 yards from the main line. If they are overrun, there will be no help. The rain intensifies, hammering against their helmets, drowning out. All subtle noise. This is the weather of death, the conditions the Japanese prefer for their attacks. The rain masks the sound of movement. Miller checks his weapon. He racks the slide. Clack, clack. The sound is loud, mechanical, reassuring. He loads 6 shells, 1 in the chamber, 5 in the tube. He keeps a pouch of loose shells on his chest for easy access. Around 02:00, the rain slackens. The temperature drops to a chilling 72 degrees, leaving the soaking wet Marines shivering in their holes. Then the smell hits them. A sickly sweet odor of hair oil and unwashed bodies drifting up from the ravine. The enemy is close. Suddenly, a flare pops overhead, casting a swaying, eerie green light over the landscape. The jungle floor is moving. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers are crawling up the slope, mud smeared on their bodies, bayonets fixed. They are less than 30 yards away. The silence shatters with a scream, "Tenohaika Banzai." The slope erupts. The Marines open fire. The sharp crack of rifles punctures the air, but the Japanese keep coming. They are moving too fast, bobbing and weaving. A Marine to Miller's left fires his bolt-action Springfield, works the bolt, and is stabbed before he can fire a second shot. Miller stands up. This is the moment the weapon was made for. He doesn't aim, he points. He squeezes the trigger and racks the slide simultaneously. The Winchester Model 1897 has no trigger disconnector. This means if you hold the trigger down and pump the slide, the gun fires instantly as the bolt closes. It is called slam firing. Boom clack, boom clack, boom clack, boom. In under 3 seconds, Miller unleashes 4 rounds. Each shell sends 9.33 caliber lead pellets screaming into the darkness. That is 36 projectiles creating a wall of lead. The first Japanese soldier, 5 yards away, is lifted off his feet. The second and third, rushing behind him, are caught in the spread and drop instantly. The recoil is punishing, bruising. Miller's shoulder, but the effect is hypnotic. The trench broom clears a cone of death in front of the foxhole. The Japanese charge, reliant on momentum and terror, hits a physical wall. But then disaster strikes. On the 5th pump, the slide sticks. A muddy shell casing fails to eject perfectly. The heat of the barrel is already searing Miller's hand through the heat shield. A Japanese officer, sword raised, screams and lunges from the shadows on the right flank. He is 10 feet away. 8 feet. Miller stomps his boot on the receiver, forcing the action open, and rips the jammed shell out with his fingernails. He throws a fresh brass shell directly into the open chamber. A 6 feet. Miller snaps the action shut and fires from the hip. The muzzle flash is a blinding white sphere in the dark. The officer crumples, his sword clattering against the coral rock. The immediate outcome is silence. The specific sector in front of Miller's position is silent. The rest of the line is. Still fighting, but here, the Banzai charge has been broken. The psychological shock of the rapid-fire devastation has forced the remaining attackers to divert. Miller sinks back into the mud, his hands shaking, the barrel of the shotgun hissing as raindrops hit the scorching metal. He looks at the pile of spent brass casings between his feet. He has burned through 20 rounds in less than 2 minutes. He is alive, but the night is far from over. In the aftermath of the Pacific Campaign, a different kind of fog descended, not of war, but of bureaucracy. As the islands were secured and the war moved toward the Japanese home islands, the narrative of the conflict began to be sanitized for public consumption. The image of the Marine was crafted carefully. The rifleman, the marksman, the hero. The brutal, messy reality of close-quarters shotgun warfare was quietly pushed to the margins. In 1946, investigators from the Judge Advocate General's office began reviewing combat reports from the Solomon Islands. Their official mandate was to document war crimes and analyze the effectiveness of enemy tactics. However, there was a sub-department buried deep within the naval archives, tasked with reconciling supply discrepancies. They were looking for the lost weapons. Major Thomas Holloway was one of these investigators. A meticulous man with a background in logistics, Holloway noticed a pattern. Thousands of 12-gauge brass shells had been shipped to the Pacific, but official expenditure reports showed almost zero usage. Where had the ammo gone? Holloway traveled to the decommissioning yards in San Diego, where returning ships were offloading equipment. He interviewed returning Marines, asking specific, probing questions. Did you witness the use of non-regulation firearms? Were shotguns used in offensive operations or only for guard duty? The answers he got were evasive. Marines, loyal to their units and their survival methods, played dumb. Just rifles, sir. Maybe. The MPs had some shotguns, but we didn't see 'em. But Holloway found physical evidence. In a rusting Quonset hut in 1947, he discovered a crate of returned Model 97s. They were battered, stocks cracked, metal pitted. But the most telling detail was the modifications. The disconnectors had been filed down to make slam firing even faster. The bayonet lugs were worn silver. These guns had seen heavy combat. He wrote a report, The Unauthorized Tactical Adaptation of 12-Gauge Weaponry in Forward Areas. In it, he argued that the effectiveness of the shotgun had been the deciding factor in several key engagements, contradicting the official stance that superior rifle marksmanship had won the day. His report was classified. The reason was political. The U.S. was rebuilding a post-war world, admitting to the widespread use of a weapon that the Axis powers had labeled barbaric and illegal under their interpretation of the laws of war was diplomatically inconvenient. The narrative needed. To be clean, the shotgun was a riot gun for police, not a weapon of war. And so the trench brooms disappeared. They were sold as surplus to police departments, melted down for scrap, or simply lost in the vast warehouses of the military-industrial complex. Years passed. The men like Sergeant Miller returned home. They became postmen, mechanics, fathers. Miller lived a quiet life in Ohio. He never joined the VFW. He never marched in parades. He kept a single brass shotgun shell in a shoebox in his attic, buried under tax returns and baby photos. To his neighbors, he was just a quiet man who didn't like fireworks. They saw him mowing his lawn, fixing his roof, living the American dream he had fought for. They didn't know about the night on the ridge. They didn't know about the feeling of a slam-fire action vibrating in his bones. The investigators eventually retired or died. Halloway's report gathered dust in a warehouse in Maryland. The truth of the shotgun's pivotal role in the Pacific faded into folklore, discussed only in hushed tones by dying men in VA hospital wards. Decades slipped away. The jungle grew back over the foxholes on Guadalcanal. The steel rusted. The wood rotted. The secret died with the men, or so they thought. Back in the present day, Dr. Vance's excavation team is carefully expanding the dig site. They have moved from surface detection to a full-scale archaeological recovery. The team uses ground-penetrating radar, GPR, to map the subsurface anomalies. The scan reveals a collapsed tunnel structure, likely a Japanese command post that had been sealed by explosives, a tomb frozen in time. They bring in heavy equipment, pneumatic vacs to suck away the dirt without damaging the artifacts. Layer 1, the perimeters. The first layer of discovery, found at a depth of 3 feet, confirms the intensity of the battle. They find the rusted remains of U.S. Marine ponchos and boots mixed with Japanese canteens. This layer represents the surface. Fighting the hand-to-hand struggle. Forensic analysis of the soil reveals high concentrations of lead and nitrates. But it is the specific distribution of the lead that puzzles the ballistics expert, Dr. Aris Thorne. "Look at this," Thorne says, pointing to a digital map of the lead deposits. "Rifle fire creates straight lines, impact points. This is a spray. It covers everything." Layer 2, the breach. As they dig deeper, reaching the entrance of the collapsed bunker, they find the second reveal. Embedded in the petrified wood of the bunker's support beams are hundreds of small, round pellets. "Buckshot," Vance whispers. "Buck." They carefully extract a section of the wood. Under the microscope, the damage is catastrophic. The wood has been shredded. Carbon dating and chemical analysis of the gunpowder residue confirm it is American-made propellant from the early 1940s. This confirms that the Marines didn't just hold the line, they pursued the enemy into their own. Fortifications using these weapons. This contradicts the defensive use-only narrative. They were using the shotguns as bunker busters. Layer 3, the brass grave. At 6 feet down, inside the main chamber of the tunnel, the team hits the most shocking layer. It is a carpet of brass. Hundreds of spent 12-gauge casings are scattered across the floor of the bunker. But container number 4 held something that changed everything. In the corner of the bunker, preserved by the dry air of the sealed chamber, is a Japanese ammunition crate, but it hasn't been used for Japanese ammo. Vance pries the lid open. Inside are 4 Winchester Model 12 shotguns, the hammerless successor to the Model 97. They are stacked neatly. These are not standard issue. Vance lifts one out. It is heavy. He shines his light on the receiver. There is an engraving, crude and hand-scratched. The Bastard Squad. And then the expert analysis comes in from the lab. The serial numbers on these guns retrace to a shipment that was officially listed as lost at sea in 1942. They weren't lost. They were diverted, stolen. The final reveal lies in the chamber of one of the guns. Vance carefully opens the action. A live round ejects. It is a brass shell, but the tip has been modified. The lead shot has been poured over with wax. Wax slugs, Thorne says, his voice trembling. They turned birdshot into solid slugs. This is field modification on a massive level. This creates a projectile that acts like a solid cannonball until it hits the target, then expands. It's devastating. This was the ultimate truth. The Marines hadn't just used old guns. They had engineered a way to make them even deadlier, creating a weapon system that terrified the enemy so much they refused to enter the tunnels if they suspected a shotgun was waiting. The outdated guns were actually the most advanced close-quarters weapon on the battlefield, evolved through soldier ingenuity. The discovery of the Bastard Squad. Cash rewrites the tactical history of the Pacific War. It explains the anomalies in the casualty reports. For decades, historians struggled to understand how small squads of Marines held off waves of attackers with bolt-action rifles. The math never added up. The rate of fire was too slow. Now the math makes perfect sense. A standard M1 Garand holds 8 rounds. A skilled shooter can fire maybe 1 round per second accurately. A Winchester Model 97 or Model 12, using the slam fire technique, can empty 6 rounds in 2 seconds. Each round contains 9 pellets. That is 54 projectiles in 2 seconds. Multiply that by a squad of 4 men. That is 216 projectiles filling the air in the time it takes a human heart to beat 3 times. It wasn't marksmanship that stopped the Banzai charges. It was a wall of lead. This vindicates the ghost of Major Holloway and the other investigators who suspected the truth. The cover-up wasn't malicious. It was a byproduct of a military trying to standardize and modernize. They wanted to believe the future was semi-automatic rifles and air power. They didn't want to admit that the decisive weapon of the jungle was a pump-action relic from the Wild West. The implications extend beyond Guadalcanal. This discovery suggests a wider network of scrounging and adaptation. It explains similar anecdotal evidence from Peleliu and Okinawa. The shotgun was the great equalizer against an enemy that had no fear of death. It turned the psychological weapon of the Banzai charge against the attackers. The Japanese soldiers, expecting to terrify the Americans with their screams and bayonets, were instead met with a weapon that could physically lift them off the ground. We now know that the outdated gun was the only reason many of these positions didn't fall. The Marines didn't win because they had better technology. They won because they were willing to reach back into the past and use the most brutal tool available. They adapted. They survived. Among the artifacts in the Bastard Squad crate, Vance finds a small, watertight tin. Inside is a photograph and a letter. The photo shows 4 young men, shirtless, mud-caked, holding their shotguns with a grim pride. They don't look like the clean-cut heroes of the newsreels. They look like men who have seen the end of the world. The letter is dated November 1942. It is addressed to a Mary in Akron, Ohio. Dear Mary, don't worry about me. The nights are bad and the rain never stops. But we found some old brooms to sweep the porch with. They're ugly and they kick like a mule, but they keep the ghosts away. As long as I have this old girl, I'm coming home to you. The handwriting matches the scratch on the gun. Research into the unit reveals that the author of the letter, a Corporal James Red O'Malley, did make it home. He passed away in 1998. His granddaughter, contacted by the research team, wept when shown the photo. He never talked about the war, she said, but he always kept an old hunting shotgun in the closet. He said it was the only thing that never let him down. We never knew what he meant. We just thought he liked to hunt. This discovery bridges the gap between the cold steel of the artifact and the human heart that relied on it. The shotgun wasn't just a tool of destruction. It was a security blanket. It was the only thing standing between a 19-year-old boy and the darkness of a hostile jungle. Sometimes progress is not about the newest technology, but about finding the right tool for the job. The M1 Garand won the war in Europe, but in the rotting jungles of the Pacific, it was the outdated trench gun that saved the Marines. History teaches us that in the face of existential threat, humans will innovate, adapt, and break the rules to survive. The Winchester Model 97, a weapon designed for bird hunting and trench raids, found its ultimate purpose in the hands of desperate men on a lonely island ridge. Today, the rusted shotgun sits in a museum case, cleaned and preserved. The brass casings are displayed next to it, a silent testament to the fury of that night. The jungle has reclaimed the foxholes, but the story has been dug up, cleaned off, and brought into the light. The beep of the metal detector started this journey, echoing the mechanical clack-clack of the shotgun's slide, a sound that meant safety for the Marines and doom for their enemies. If you enjoyed this investigation into the hidden weapons of WWII, comment below which mystery we should investigate next: the lost gold of the Philippines or the secret Nazi Antarctic base.